When you imagine your life going well, what does that actually look like? Where are you? What are you doing? How do you feel when you wake up in the morning? I think, for a lot of us, there's a significant and largely unexamined gap between that image and the life we are actually constructing daily with each choice we make. Or, more to the point, with each non-choice we make. There's a question that gets asked a lot in online spaces centered around mental health and self-compassion, and what people are calling rest culture. The question is some version of this: don't I have the right to stop sometimes? To withdraw, without owing anyone an explanation for my withdrawal? And the answer is yes. Of course you do. There is ultimately no greater power forcing you to account for your non-work hours, or to whom you owe your ambitions, your output, your hygiene, your social effort, your nutritional choices, or your general participation in self-cultivation. You can actually let all of that go sometimes, but that's also where the conversation tends to stop. And it's where I think we do each other a disservice by letting it stop. Because talking about rights is only half of the equation. The other half is consequences. And consequences are simply the shape of the world you have built by the choices you have made, or not made. They are literally what your choices look like from the outside. So yes, you have the right to rot in bed. You have the right to not answer those messages, to not wash your sheets, or avoid a difficult conversation. You have the right to let your days accumulate into a blur of avoidance. But how is that working out for you? There is a meaningful difference between rest and retreat. Rest is something you return from, like on a weekend where you've genuinely disengaged and then came back to your life on Monday, suddenly feeling like yourself again. It has a quality of renewal to it, but that's not what we're talking about. What I suspect most people are actually describing when they talk about their right to step back is something closer to a sustained state of withdrawal. Not rest in between engagements, but rest instead of engagement. But what are you withdrawing from? And what has your withdrawal cost you? Because the longer you remain in retreat, the smaller your world becomes, in the very concrete sense that the world you are not engaging with stops waiting for you. And then the gap between who you are and who you want to be widens and widens, until one day you suddenly notice how wide it got, and the prospect of crossing that gap feels impossible. So you retreat a little further, and the world gets a little smaller, and the cycle continues. There's a concept in Stoic philosophy that distinguishes between things within our control and things outside it, and it's very emphatic that your only legitimate concern should be the former and not the latter. It states that what is within our control, fundamentally, is our own choices and our own responses to our experiences. What I find compelling about this is that this is actually quite demanding. It's not a permission slip to disengage from the world on the grounds that the world is outside your control. Rather, it's an insistence that you take complete ownership of the one thing that is inside your control, which is yourself. The Stoics were advocating a very particular kind of activity: continuous, deliberate self-governance in the face of a world that will not always cooperate with your preferences. There are also circumstances in which what looks like passivity and avoidance is actually, at that moment, for that person, all that can reasonably be asked. Severe depression and chronic illnesses are very real. Grief can hollow you out, and burnout can take you months to recover from. Trauma can fundamentally disrupt your relationship with your own agency. Things can get so bad where it's just not simply realistic to just choose to get up and do better. But the question of whether you'll eventually have to extend some marginal effort toward the small levers you can actually pull is not an irrelevant one. Because the thing about agency is that it doesn't stay at a fixed level, waiting for you to return to it. It responds to use. The more you exercise it, even in small ways, the more available it becomes. The more you defer it, the more you tell yourself that you'll engage with your life when things are easier, or when the circumstances are more favorable, the further it recedes. When someone says I have the right to do nothing, what they're really asserting is a kind of negative liberty, a freedom from interference. And that kind of freedom is real, and it matters. The freedom to not have your choices dictated to you by someone else's vision of what your life should look like. But there's another kind of freedom that doesn't get talked about nearly as much, and it's the freedom that comes from having built a life, or a set of skills and habits, that doesn't require you to be at your best in order to function. The freedom that comes from not being entirely at the mercy of how you feel on any given day. This is what Nietzsche meant when he talked about self-overcoming. The person who has done the work of building a stronger relationship with their own agency has more room in their life. They've built a foundation that holds. The person who has no such foundation, who has organized their life entirely around the avoidance of discomfort and around the principle that they should only do things when they feel like doing them, that person is, paradoxically, far more enslaved to their own internal states than anyone who has done the unglamorous work of sometimes acting contrary to how they feel. They have made themselves the hostage of their own moods, and moods are not always merciful. Here's what it actually looks like to organize your life around the principle of, I'll do it when I feel like it. You feel like rotting in bed, so you rot in bed. You don't get up, except to eat, and your dishes accumulate. Your messages go unanswered. Your after-work project you were interested in continuing sits untouched. You start to feel worse for having done nothing, which makes the prospect of doing anything slightly more aversive, which makes it slightly easier to justify continuing to do nothing, which means the dishes accumulate further and the messages become harder to answer. Because now there's an awkward gap, and the project has been sitting long enough that you've lost the thread of it, and starting feels harder than it did before. Meanwhile, the world is still making demands, because there are always things that have to be done. And so when you finally do get up, as you will, because you eventually always do, you'll find that the world is slightly less hospitable than it was before, and slightly less forgiving. The window for the easy version has closed, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be has quietly widened while you were waiting to feel ready. When people invoke their right to rot, I don't think they are actually making a philosophical argument about liberty. I think mostly they are describing how tired they are, how thoroughly the gap between who they are and who they wanted to be has become. And to that, I do have a lot of compassion. The way the world can start to feel like it is asking too much of you, like the bar for a functional life is set absurdly high, and the people who seem to be managing it are doing so by some mysterious means that was not made available to you. I understand why that leads people toward the consolation of, I have the right to stop trying, but here's what I want to leave you with. You are not in a static relationship with your life. Everything you do, or don't do, is shaping it, including the choice to wait. And the shape of your world tomorrow will be partly a function of what you do today. It means that the world is not fixed. It means that your agency is not gone, it's just dormant. And the distance between dormant and active is often much smaller than it looks from inside your exhaustion. So I'll ask you the same thing I ask myself. On the days when my bed is very comfortable, and the world is very demanding, and the argument for doing nothing becomes very persuasive, it's not whether you were entitled to step back, but what does the world look like now that you have? And now that you have, how merciful of a world do you find yourself in?